The Sweet Sound of Success show is brought to you by the Mentor Studio. The Mentor Studio is an exclusive mentoring and training program for social influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and startups, bringing personal development to the underserved around the world. And brought to you by Success Strategists. Simple strategies that work to develop your business with flow and ease using proven strategies and the right tactics. This is the Sweet Sound of Success with Sue Wilhite, Profit Attraction Master. Mitch Russo, who started a software company in his garage, sold it for 8 figures, and then went on to work directly with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to build a $25 million plus business together. Nominated twice for Inc. Magazine Entrepreneur of the Year, Mitch helps companies scale rapidly. His first book is called The Invisible Organization, and his second one is called Power Tribes: How Certification Can Explode Your Business, which have helped hundreds of thousands of companies scale rapidly. Today, he's here to help you solve an age-old problem while telling his hero's journey story. Thank you for being on my show, Mitch. It is such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Sue. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Yeah. So the subtitle of this show, for those of you who are listening or watching and haven't encountered this before, this is based on the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell. And the hero's journey actually has something like 16 different stages in it, and we're only going to take out 5 of them. So the 5 stages that we're going to talk about today are the ordinary beginning, which I always laugh at because no entrepreneur has an ordinary beginning. They might say they do, but nobody's ordinary. The call to action, what brought the entrepreneur to becoming an entrepreneur. The big hairy monsters. And sometimes those 2 stages get a little bit tied together. It might be a big hairy monster that drove the call to action, or sometimes the call to action brought up big hairy monsters to play with and deal with. And then 2 things that I think are extraordinarily important for all entrepreneurs out there, and that is the section about allies, guides, mentors, people who I call the wind beneath your wings, people who helped you along the way, because there's this myth about entrepreneurs doing it by themselves, and I really want to explode that myth in as many ways as I can. And then finally, one of the common big hairy monsters for all entrepreneurs, and it's one that I like to focus on, is called the journey home. And it really has to do with the entrepreneur who has become an entrepreneur. And once you've accepted that first payment for whatever product or service that you're giving, it changes you fundamentally, as much as, say, Frodo going off and, putting on a ring that makes him invisible and ultimately he destroys it, or Harry Potter going to Hogwarts, or anybody in any literature whatsoever going off on their first adventure. When they come back, nobody knows how to deal with them. They don't know how to deal with ordinary life because they've changed. And entrepreneurs deal with this on a regular basis. And I love to bring this out and talk about this because this is really important. And it's very discouraging for some entrepreneurs. So I like to sort of dispel some of the anxiety that people have about this. So Mitch, what is your ordinary beginning?
Well, there were several. There's the ordinary beginning of being a teenager and somewhat awkward and growing up, and that really, in many ways, was the beginning of my business life too. And the reason I say that is because I was very shy, and I really had no I had no girl friends. I had only guy friends, and my friends did have girlfriends, and so being an engineer, or by having an engineering mindset, even as a little boy, I thought, well, how can I figure this out? Because there's got to be a way to figure this out. So what I had figured is that the best way to attract girls would be to have a rock band. So I set out to learn how to play the guitar. It took years, and then I started a band. And then I was able at that point to attract girls to band practice, and ended up having dates, and it basically worked. But there was a side effect to that whole process. Would you like me to share that part of the story?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
So what happened was that, I mean, we were 15, 16 years old. Most kids back then were smoking pot and hanging out. And so we get together for band practice, and we'd all get high and we'd all play, and it would sound terrific to our stoned out, dumb brains. And then one day we turned on the tape recorder, and after band practice, we played back the recording and said, "Ooh, we suck. Oh, that was terrible." So we made an agreement. We said, from now on, we're no longer going to be getting high before band practice. And God forbid we should ever get a job. We'd never get high or drink during a job. So we agreed to meet every week for band practice. And then, me being the lead guitar player and the leader of the band, I insisted that we stick with one song until we get it right. Could take 2-3 weeks to get it right, but the goal was to build a playlist of 12 to 15 songs that we could then go and perform in public. And we all felt good about that. So we applied that, and we did it. And then we scored our very first gig. And that gig was $50. We got paid $50 to go and play at a Sweet 16 party, and everybody loved us. It was a fantastic event, and then someone else called and said, "Hey, I heard you played at Mary's Sweet 16. Could you play at my daughter's Sweet 16?" And on this went. And every time we got a new job, we raised the price. Yes. So once we started raising the price, I realized, well, occasionally people say to me, "Do you have references?" So I started asking moms if they wouldn't mind. Here's a clipboard. After the performance, could you write a quick note about how we did for you, just in case, just so we have that. And so I started collecting testimonials. Now we are invited to play at a public place. So I took a little note and posted it in the supermarket. And someone suggested, "Well, why don't you send that into the local Sheepshead Bay Times?" And turns out it got published. So what I'm sharing with you, Sue, is that even at 16, I was learning all of the core lessons of how to build, price test, quality assure, and then deliver a great product at a fair price to everybody involved. And of course, the best lesson of all was that once you got this all done and once it was working, we were having fun. And that was the best part.
Right. And you got raving fans.
And we got some raving fans and a girlfriend out of the deal as well. So it worked out terrific. And it was really there was a point in the story that I should have explained, and I will now. So while I did say that we would not get high during band practice, it turns out that we were all still getting high. There was no doubt about that. Right. But I unfortunately took the slippery slope and started using narcotics, hard narcotics. And I was shooting heroin. And so it was a Thursday afternoon, and I purchased this little glassine bag of heroin. I put it in my wallet, and I agreed that I said, "I'm not going to touch this until after band practice on Saturday." Well, being a junkie, that little glassine bag was burning a hole in my brain. It's all I could think about until after band practice on Saturday. So after band practice, I took that little bag and I tapped it into my bent spoon with a fire underneath and a cotton ball, and I injected water into the spoon, and I boiled it up, and I drew it up into the syringe. I tied off my arm, and I pulled the belt tight, And just as I was about to plunge it into my arm while everything was nice and hot, the phone rings. So I put down the needle and I pick up the phone and I say, hello, hello. And all I hear is clicking. Now, I didn't hear silence. I heard clicking, thinking that somebody's trying to connect. So I kept saying, hello, 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 hello. And nobody connected. Finally, in frustration, I just hung up and said, okay, well, I got to go back to what I was doing. And so I gave that needle one last tap to get the air bubbles out. And the needle had frozen solid. So let me explain what happened, Sue. I had purchased counterfeit heroin. It was rat poison. And had I put that into my arm, within 12 seconds, I would have been dead. So here's the question I have for you.
Who is that phone call from? Right?
Who called me?
Oh, that's giving me goosebumps. Oh.
So it gives me goosebumps too. It makes me tear up because I sat there. I cried for 20 minutes. I sobbed, and I saw in front of me for the first time two pathways. I saw a pathway to being a junkie and dying in 6 months or less. And I saw a pathway to a successful life as an adult. And I decided that it wasn't worth being a junkie. And this was a shot across the bow, as they say. Right. It was to me, for me, it doesn't mean that everyone has to believe this, but for me, the phone call came from heaven.
Yep.
And that phone call saved my life, even though there was nobody there. And I then at that point went on to build a life for myself. I picked up the pieces. I went through withdrawal on my own, as hard as that was, without sharing that with anybody or my parents even. And later they did find out and put me into rehab. So then at that point, I ended up in rehab for 18 months. Wow. And now I'm 18 years old. I emerged from rehab, clean, sober, driven, sharp as a tack, and raring to go. And that's how I started my adult life, Sue.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so that is totally not an ordinary beginning.
You don't think so?
That's an extraordinary beginning. Well, that is truly amazing. That's a great story.
Thank you. That actually is my that in a condensed form is my keynote address. That's what I start with when I speak from stage. So the whole point that I wanted to bring up about this was that when later in life it was time for me to literally start my very first real company, I had already learned the core fundamentals of what it took to create a successful enterprise by building a rock band and dealing drugs in high school as well. But more, but more building the rock band was my lessons. And you know, it was an incredible experience. My partner and I, we took $5,000 each. We put it into a bank account, and then because I was a little bit savvy as a young man, I went to the bank and I said to the banker, we'd like to open up a line of credit. And the bank said, how much would you like to borrow? I said, we'd like to borrow $2,500. And of course, you can imagine all the paperwork and all that stuff. So we filled it out and we ended up with a commercial line of credit secured by my partner and I, personal signatures. Right. And we borrowed $2,500 and we bought a copy machine. So that was our very first piece of what I would call capital equipment. Okay. And now at this point, our journey began. And so we ended up starting a software company on the idea of creating software that would keep track of the computer usage so that you could report your computer to the IRS on your tax return so you can deduct it. Back then, a computer was $5,000. I'm sure you might remember if you're anywhere near as old as I am. I doubt, but in case. And so the bottom line is that we spent, entrepreneurs can work a whole day, right? I mean, right. A whole day. So what's a whole day? You go to work until 5, and you come home and you start work again until midnight. So that's a whole day.
Right.
So we worked whole days, or we called them half days at the time. And we worked for 6 months to build this product, document it, test it, get it out there. And then at that time, it was Friday afternoon. My partner and I, we went in and we quit our jobs. We announced that we're starting a company and we're done. The following Monday, my accountant calls and says, Mitch, I got some bad news for you. I said, what's the problem? He goes, the IRS has relaxed its rulings on contemporaneous record keeping. I'm sorry, Mitch, but your software has no value anymore. So have a nice day. So there we were. We had just quit our jobs.
Right.
Burned the boats.
Right.
And we had nothing but a product that had no value whatsoever.
Oh, man. Okay. So I'm hoping this is a pivot moment.
It is a pivot moment. But here again, you know, I have to give myself and my partner a little bit of credit here, because for the first 2 hours, we moped and cursed and screamed and threw things around and you know, figured out what, tried to figure out what we're going to do. I thought, well, maybe I can get my job back. And he sort of had the same thought. And then I said, no, we have something that's way too good to just throw away here. So what are we going to do? And we started to brainstorm and say, who else could use a product that keeps track of time? And we started making a list. Well, lawyers, they keep track of time. Accountants keep track of time. Consultants keep track of time. Architects keep track of time. In fact, you know what? Every corporation keeps track of time for time in attendance. All of a sudden, now we get re-energized. And now we're saying, why don't we build a time and billing software platform for anybody who wants to bill by the hour? Well, back to the drawing board. But remember now, we already quit our jobs.
Right.
Now we're full-time on starting from scratch, building on this technology platform. And amazingly, 90 days later, we had a product and we were ready to launch. And that's how we began. That's how we began this company.
Dang. Good for you.
Well,
good for you. And I will say, just as an aside, I want to tell anybody who runs up against seeming roadblocks of this kind, that it's really important to spend those 2 hours kicking the wall and throwing things and having a total tantrum. There's real brain research that says that is incredibly valuable to get yourself out of your own way.
Yep.
Then sit down and go, okay, now what do we do?
I completely agree. And it turns out, you know, at that point, we ended up, you know, we had this great product. We had this company. So what we did is we put the $5,000, we had our $10,000 in total, $5,000 each into the bank account. And we said, you know what, we're really, we have a great product. We call this overconfidence. We have a great product. So we blew almost all of it on 2 ads in PC Magazine. So we thought to ourselves, you know what? Everybody needs to keep track of time. I just gave you the whole list of everybody who does.
Right.
Well, we were selling our software at the time for $99.95. And guess how many copies of the software we sold after spending $6,000 on ads? Hold up one hand. Hold up one hand. Let me see it. There you go. 5 copies of the software from that. So we were now like devastated, and we were like really licking our chops thinking, what do we do from here? And then about 2 weeks later, the ad rep drives up to my house because everything was running out of my garage, and said basically, look, I'm sorry. I know you had expected it to work. I know I told you it was going to work and it didn't. But by the way, I am obligated to give these to you. They're your bingo leads. And I said, well, what's a bingo lead? And he said, well, you know, inside the magazine, there's a card with a lot of numbers on it. I said, yeah. He goes, well, people sit down and go through the whole magazine and they circle the numbers of the ads that they would like more information from. And then they send that in to us. So we collect those, and here you are. There are 500 that people who circled your name. So I said, oh, okay, what do I do with these? He goes, I don't know. They're mostly worthless. I would throw them away, but I have to give them to you. So now you got to remember, I had no other options at this point. So I said, I said, you know what? I'm going to call them all. And I sat down there, and one after the other, I picked up the phone and I called as many as I could possibly reach. I sold another 30 copies of the software, which is fine. But more importantly, I learned a valuable lesson. That became my market research. Who do you think was most interested in our software out of everybody who read PC Magazine? Want to guess?
Not a clue.
Lawyers with PCs.
Lawyers, number one. Okay. Yep.
So at that point, I said to my partner, I said, look, you know what? We're done marketing to the masses. We're going to focus on marketing to lawyers. Number one, it's smaller market. It's cheaper. Number two, we can get very nichey here. We can go right after those lawyers who have PCs. And instead of, back then, the billing department was at the back of the office. We were appealing to the entrepreneurial lawyers who had the PC on their desk. It was kind of rare at the time, 1985, 86, but it was happening. And we made a bet, and we bet our whole company on it and even our future on it. We made a bet, two bets. A, computers will become more accepted in the front office on lawyers' desks, number one. Number two, the price of the PC will eventually come down to under $1,000. Well, we got lucky.
Yeah.
And so now, remember now, we still don't have much money. We're still now spending the balance of our small investment amount on classified ads in hundreds of, or dozens, I should say, of little legal publications, trying to get one or two sales from each one. And we had a spreadsheet and we tracked them all. So we were doing it as carefully as possible. And then there was a trade show coming up called Comdex.
Yes. Good old Comdex.
Good old Comdex. So we could never afford a booth. So I went to Comdex with 100 copies of our software and one pair of sneakers and a suit and tie. And I spent 14 days walking over 1 million square feet, trying to make connections to get my software in the hands of influencers. And I just walked around every night. I'd talk to my partner and he'd say, how you doing today? I said, and I never wanted to tell him anything other than good news, because I never wanted him to ever feel like it wasn't real or something like that. So I said, oh, it's going great. I met these great people and blah, blah, blah. Inside, I was kind of dying because nothing was happening, but I didn't care. I just kept going from place to place to place. I visited every possible magazine publication I could find, asked to speak to the person in charge of software reviews. I gave them a copy. I left a business card and I left and I walked away. Well, I come home after 100 copies of the software are gone. It's 2 weeks later. My shoes are completely worn out. And I was, of course, tired and hoping to kind of recover from that. We had another trade show to go to, but now we had no money. So trying to figure out how we're going to get there. And I get a phone call from my mom. I say to my mom, mom says, hi, Mitch, how's it going? How are you guys doing? I said, oh, we're doing great, Mom. Thanks for calling. Yeah, everything is wonderful. She says, sweetheart, how are things really going? I said, Mom, we're probably 15 days from bankruptcy. And she said, honey, I don't want you to worry. Everything is going to turn out great. You'll see. I said, okay, Mom, thank you. Mom's encouraging. So then we go back to trying to figure out how we're going to get to this trade show. Well, we scrounged up a van, a folding table, and a sheet. We rented a TV in New York City, and we brought a laptop computer. Well, we had no money for a hotel, but we didn't care. We figured out maybe we could sleep at friends' houses. That day, the day before we leave, a Federal Express truck pulls up to my house. Now, remember this is 1985. It was a rare occurrence to even see a Federal Express truck, let alone receive a Federal Express package.
Right.
So doorbell rings. It's the FedEx man. He says, sign here, hands me an envelope, walks away. So I said, okay, who's it from? There's no from address. It's just an envelope, but it's kind of thick and bulky. I zip open the top of the envelope. I open it up and I look inside, and there's a note sitting on top of $10,000 in cash from my mom. And the note said, "Hope this helps. Love you, Mom."
Aw. Wow. Okay.
Fast forward 7 years later, we sold. Mom saved the day. Fast forward, it was about 7 years later, we finally get to the point we're ready to sell the company. We 8 years or so, we have the offer for the company. We're ready to sell. My partner walks into my office without me saying a word, says, "Hey, remember that 10K you got from your mom? Let's pay her back." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that. How much do you think we should pay her back?" He says, "I don't know. How about 100?" I said, "Yeah, that's good. That's good." So we sent my mom a check for $100,000,
Yeah.
and she was out of her mind. She was thrilled
Hey,
because it wasn't a loan, it was a
Right.
gift.
Right. But still, hey, that's a 10 times investment return.
Yep. She was pretty excited about that. And
Yeah.
so we built the company, and we built it step by step, and we had some luck. One of those copies dropped off, turned out to become the pivot turning point for the entire company. We got a review published in InfoWorld. It exploded the company. We went from selling 6 copies a week to 600 copies a week. We doubled the
Nice.
price so that we could sell through wholesalers and distributors.
Right.
And we kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And that's the story of how I built my first company.
Wow. So you've kind of woven in a lovely way, without me prompting, thank you. The big hairy monsters. I mean, you really dealt with some pretty hairy ones, and allies. Certainly your mom, that mysterious phone call from heaven, and the influencers who took you on and spread the word. That is so fabulous. Creating raving fans.
It was an experience of a lifetime. Those 9 years were the greatest experience, the greatest education I ever received. I won't speak for anyone else. And the best part about it, besides, of course, that we both we didn't ever have investors. So when we sold the money, we basically kept it all to ourselves.
Right.
And we gave some bonuses to our staff. But for the most part, we didn't know anything about how to invest. We were very unsophisticated financially. We were terrified of venture capital people, so we thought of them as thieves, basically. We called them vulture capital.
Right.
And they were. And as a result, we said, "Screw you, we don't need you." And we went on and did what we did. But here again, talk about the serendipity of life. So I get a phone call while I'm running the company, in the thick of it, as we're growing 100% a year at one point. Get a phone call from this pesky salesman trying to sell me ad space in California Lawyer magazine. So this guy, is promising me the moon, and he is like the cartoon example of a salesman. That's kind of how I think of him, and it turns out that man was Chet Holmes. So,
right.
So Chet has, if you've read Chet's book, he has a concept in his book called the Dream 100, where you isolate the top 100 prospects and you shower them with attention and love to try and get them to close. Well, he had targeted me as one of his Dream 100 clients. Took him 18 months to close me. But when he did, we ended up with a double page 4-color spread for the price of a single page black and white with premium positioning in California Lawyer, and it avalanched our revenue.
Right.
And we, at that point, we continued to buy double page 4-color spreads in the magazine. And Chet and I built a friendship that lasted all of our lives. And that friendship extended way past the point of selling the company, because then when I was sold to Sage, I brought Chet in to do my sales training for all of my teams. And then later, after I sold the company, after I was done earning out at Sage, went on to become a professional options trader because I was bored and I wanted to learn how to trade my own money.
Right.
So I started trading, and I get a call. Chet and I would talk every week. It was our common weekly call. And I get a call one week, and he was all upset and frustrated. I said, "What's the matter?" He goes, "I'm having a problem." And I said, "Okay, tell me what it is." And he told me. I said, "Let me take care of it." He goes, "How could you take care of it? This is my business. How do you?" So just let me do it. Let me just take care of it. So before I know it, the problem was just that he had a guy who really didn't do what he was telling him to do. And what he really wanted him to do was to recruit salespeople. And the guy wouldn't do it. So I called up this guy. I said, "Why won't you do it?" He goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Chet's friend, and you're upsetting him, and I don't like what you're doing. Why won't you do what Chet said?" He goes, "Look, I don't have to talk to you. I don't work for you." I said, "Listen, I'm here to help you. I'd like to understand what it is that you have a problem with. Maybe I can do it for you." He goes, "Well, you can't do it." I said, "Why not?" He goes, "Because I'm an expert. I recruit salespeople." I said, "Well, how about if I took that off your plate?" He goes, "Okay." I said, "Will you then leave my buddy alone and play nice?" He goes, "Yeah, I guess." So I called up Chet and I said, "I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is you're not going to have a problem with that guy anymore. The bad news is I'm your new sales recruiter." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Have you ever done it before?" I said, "Nope." He goes, "Okay, don't worry about it. Just read chapter 5 in my book. You'll be set." I said, "Really?" He goes, Yeah, don't worry about it." So I read chapter 5. And of course, me being a software guy, having built a software company, having gone to school for engineering, I, of course, created a system for recruiting. So I built all the templates, the spreadsheets. I created all the software automation on my own. And I started building the sales force. I tripled the sales force in 6 weeks. And I found the person who I felt would be a great manager. I called up Chet and I said, "Chet, okay, I'm done. We tripled your sales force. Everybody's cooking. Things are going great. We did a great training. We got a manager in place. I just want to let you know, I think you're all set." And he says, "Wow, Mitch, that's amazing. Thanks so much." I said, "Yeah, you're welcome." He says, "Well, I'm going to go back to my options trading." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you asked me for a favor and I did it for you." He goes, well, what am I supposed to do with this $18,000 check sitting on my desk?" I said, "Chet, I don't want to be paid for I didn't do this for money." He goes, "Well, I'm not going to pay you, Mitch. That's what you earned. That's your commission on the sales your salespeople hired, that you hired made." I said, "Oh, okay. I guess you can send it along then." He goes, "Yeah, and you ain't going anywhere. I want you to keep recruiting." So that's how I got involved in Chet's business. And before 6 months later, I was president of his company. I had personally created 3 divisions for that little company. And then later we went into discussions with Tony Robbins. Tony, Chet, and I got on the phone every Thursday night and we talked and figured out how to build a company together. And we did. And we launched it in Las Vegas and at the Mirage Hotel with 500 people. We put 500 people in the Mirage Hotel in 7 weeks. And we filled that entire auditorium. And from there, we generated 56 hours of training videos, which then packaged into becoming the ultimate business mastery system, which we then sold. And that became the beginnings of Business Breakthroughs International.
Right. Wow. What a great journey. You know, it's taking all of that knowledge and just not fighting against it. I mean, that was, if somebody's worked something out, and I come from an IT background, if somebody created a really good subroutine, I'm not going to try to take it apart unless it breaks. If it's working, I'm just going to plug it in and use it.
Of course. Well, I mean, and so of course, what happened is the company was growing and growing and growing. We were about almost 30 million by the time we hit a disaster. And you probably know what the disaster is. Chet was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia.
Yeah.
Chet was funny. He was on he had gone on vacation with his wife to a beach, and I think it was Mexico. And I mean, listen, Chet's my buddy. We've been friends all these years. And whenever he's on the beach, what he would like to do, and it was totally innocent, so don't take this the wrong way, he would snap pictures of pretty girls and he would text them to me. So he'd go, hey, look at this one, tick, and I don't open my phone and there would be this pretty girl. And so this vacation was like, all of a sudden, I'm not getting any texts from Chet. I'm going, wonder what's going on. I mean, normally I hear from Chet. I thought to myself, I sure hope he's just having such a good time that he's too busy to even do that. Well, that's when, unfortunately, he found out that he was rushed to a hospital in Mexico, and they had diagnosed him, and they airlifted him back to Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, and that's where he received his final diagnosis. And unfortunately, along the way, he had a stroke, so he couldn't speak anymore the right way he did before, and therefore we could no longer record our very famous radio ads. Our radio ads were absolutely, mind-boggling. We had gone from spending $3,000 a month on radio to $125,000 a month on radio. And I had marching orders from Tony Robbins that we cannot lose money on the radio. And I said, don't worry, Tony, I promise you we won't. And we didn't.
Yeah.
We figured out how to make radio work. And I had perfected that same exact system that I had told you about earlier that I used for recruiting to build a network, a system of running ads, driving phone calls to paid webinar seats, and then upselling a $4,000 product on those webinars. Now, I didn't say I figured all this out myself. We had a great team of people, and we did this together. But the bottom line was that we made radio pay. But once Chet got that stroke, unfortunately, we were on a slippery slope at that point.
Yeah.
And then when he died, I told Tony, I said, Tony, I need a break. Chet just died, and I lost my best friend in the world, and I just don't feel like I can go on at this point under these conditions. And he said, I completely understand, and I exited the company. I resigned, and I went on to write my first book. So that's how I wrote The Invisible Organization, which that book is all about building a virtual company. And I used my experience building BBI to create that book. So, and that book was a great success. I started then doing coaching and consulting around the content of the book. And then later, 3 years later, I wrote Power Tribes, which is the blueprint for certification. I think you could see it kind of right up here, around there somewhere.
Right there.
Yeah. And Power Tribes became a bestseller, and to this date is driving most of my coaching and consulting business as well when it comes to my high-end products, which is building certification programs. So my life is, none of this has been planned, Sue. I mean, it's sort of evolved. Right. Everything just fell into place the way it should.
Right. And to a certain extent, you were organizing it in a way that it was very systematic. And yes, there was some luck involved, but if you didn't have the systems in place to take advantage of the luck, then you would have been hosed. I mean, there are entrepreneurs who would have said, oh my God, Comdex, I'm not even going to go. Or, here's this other trade show, and not tried at all. So you've also pushed through these obstacles and made it work. So yay, that this is an example for everybody. This is fabulous.
But I also wanted to add one point to this, and this is the part that you may need to put your aluminum foil hat on for this next part of the show, because I believe I had help. I had help on let's call it from an invisible source, okay, and that help came in the form of these are not my words, but it's been said that when a person is determined and focused, the universe conspires to assist them in their mission. And I believe I had angels, if you want to call them that, working on my behalf, a team of them, in fact, working on my behalf to help propel me forward because I had the determination and the focus, and I never gave up. I never, ever once thought I was going to fail. I had a fear of failure, but I never thought I would. I figured in many ways that I thought of my fear of failure as healthy. In fact, I was terrified of my competitors, even though we were so far ahead of everybody in the entire industry. It took 6 years before someone else even came close to duplicating our secret sauce pop-up technology. I mean, so I believe I had this incredible power behind me, and I believe that we all have the access to that same power simply by believing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mitch, I understand that you have something for our audience.
I do.
That you'd like to share.
Well, one of the things I told you a little bit about was me spreading the word and building a rock band and the way I did that. Well, I learned a lot about publicity. And when I went through the process of starting Time Slips, I had to go through all of that all over again about the press and about publicity. And there were no such things as podcasts. Heck, there was no internet back then. But since then, I've learned to maximize the value of podcasts, just like we're doing today. And so I've written a guide that everyone can have for free. It's called Profit Stacking Secrets. And basically what it is it's a booklet. It's a download that has 3 core strategies for creating massive growth in revenue for free. And this is the gotcha here. If you're willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, don't even bother downloading it. But if you're going to do the work and you're willing to do the work, then you're going to love what I have for you. Just go to profitstackingsecrets.com and you will absolutely just get your free guide. Now, the other thing, Sue, if it's okay if I mention it for your coaches in the audience, again, I have a little experience here in the software business. Well, I tried to find coaching software to manage my own busy practice, and I couldn't. I searched far and wide. I tried 7 different products. They all sucked. I hated them, and they were super expensive. So I did what all great entrepreneurs should do. When they find a problem that hasn't been solved, what do, Sue?
We solve it. We make our own.
We make our own. And so that's what I did. And I want you guys to try it for $1. It's called Client Folio. And if you go to clientfol.io, you will see an incredible opportunity to get in on the ground floor of a powerful operational platform for coaches to save at least 30 minutes per session and supercharge your results with clients.
Nice. So all of those links will be in the show notes. If you're watching this, you already saw the links go by, and they will be in the after notes as well. So those are brilliant gifts. Thank you. I thought we were only getting 1. We get 2. Woohoo! Thank you, Mitch.
My pleasure.
Is wonderful. That is wonderful. So once again, I'm going to say thank you overall, Mitch. You had an extraordinary story. And I will say that as a law of attraction coach, what you're talking about with the universe conspiring to help you is absolutely part of the idea behind the law of attraction. Is you get that focus and you get that clarity, and the universe goes, okay, cool, let's do it and make it happen. So
you're absolutely right. My pleasure. Thank you,
Mitch, for just having an extraordinary life and for being a guest on my show. And thank you all to my listeners and viewers on the sweet sound of success.
are your dreams for your business? You know what drives me crazy? Really smart business owners denying their talents because they've been taught it has to be hard, because they've been taught that they don't deserve their gifts, that they're not worth anything. They've been taught that their gender means they can't express their genius. I'm Sue Wilhite, and I want you to have access to your genius. I want you to go out and rock the world with your genius. So I created the Call to Action Coaching Program. It's all about getting to the heart of you and what you've got to share with the world to make a profitable business that thrives and allows you to make a difference in the world. Click the link to sign up for the Call to Action Coaching Program today. Don't let your genius go unnoticed.